Hello and welcome to DSR's Daily. I'm David Rothkopf, joined by Riley Fesser. Hi, Riley.
Hey, how it's
You don't,
going?
you don't, you don't need me to, prod you into saying hello. You could just say hello. And
Hi.
watch how this works. And Minna Stein.
Hey, David, how are you?
There you go. See how that is? That's so spontaneous and caring. So here
Glad we
we are
rehearsed this.
in snow. Yeah, right. In snowy DC. Looks absolutely beautiful outside of our house. The dog was delighted by it, and it was a nice distraction from everything else. And activity in Washington should slow down today. And that's the good news, folks. The snow is going to slow down Washington. And the more that happens, the better. Who's going to kick us off with a real story today?
I am. Jordan's king expressed firm opposition to President Trump's plan to resettle Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank, emphasizing Jordan's commitment to stability and rejecting mass displacement, though he offered to take in 2,000 sick Palestinian children. Trump defended his proposal to develop Gaza and suggested neighboring countries like Jordan and Egypt could assist in resettlement, despite strong rejection from Arab leaders. The plan faces significant challenges as Jordan balances its reliance on U.S. aid with its refusal to accept large-scale refugees, while Gaza's humanitarian crisis and fragile ceasefire complicate the situation further.
Look, the United States is really bad at the Middle East. I can't think of many things the U.S. has done in the Middle East that have been really great successes. I guess we got Osama bin Laden, but that wasn't in the Middle East. That was in Pakistan, which is in South Asia. But administration after administration, almost as if there is some secret law, do some disastrous thing in the Middle East. You had the Iraq War, you had the debacle of 20 years of Afghanistan followed by the pullout, you had countless Middle East peace efforts that have gone off the tracks. You of course had the Biden administration's Gaza policy, which was a disaster, the Obama administration's non-Syria policy, which was everybody does something wrong. Nobody has ever proposed anything as absolutely insane as the U.S. taking over part of the Middle East. Remember, we were leaving it? Even Trump was an advocate. We were not going to spend much time there. Now he wants to actually own a chunk of the Middle East, turn it into Atlantic City, and in the process, conduct ethnic cleansing in order to enable his little real estate venture. That may work with gentrification inside, Atlantic City casino neighborhoods, but it's not going to work here. This thing is not going to happen. But the fact that Trump keeps pressing it has negative consequences nonetheless. Hamas and others are like, okay, well, if this is what the U.S. is pressuring Israel into doing, we're going to have to take a different tactic. It will radicalize radicals. It will alienate allies. And the longer he pushes it, more damage that's going to be done, whether he pursues it actively or not. Riley?
President Trump signed an executive order freezing enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, a law that prohibits U.S. businesses from bribing foreign officials to secure contracts. While supporters see the FCPA as a crucial tool against global corruption, critics argue it puts American companies at a disadvantage compared to foreign competitors. Trump called the law a, quote, disaster, claiming it unfairly hinders U.S. businesses and national interests. Experts warn this could embolden corruption, harm America's reputation, and trigger a global rollback of anti-bribery measures.
Okay, well, I play an expert here on everything. And, after editing foreign policy and writing about and commenting on virtually everything, it can seem a little excessive that I sort of seem to think I know about everything everywhere in the world. And I do. That's just the product of being a Jewish boy raised in an indulgent household in suburban New Jersey. But there are some areas in which I'm really an expert. And one of them is the implications of things like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and foreign corrupt competition on the United States. Because when I was in the U.S. government, first as Deputy Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade, later as the Acting Undersecretary for International Trade, I conducted the first big study of corruption around the world, utilizing the full resources of the United States government. I'll leave it at that, but it was a very extensive study. And there's a lot of corruption out there. And I talked to a lot of U.S. companies about this back at the time. And I've spoken to a lot of them since. And while U.S. companies feel that there are constraints associated with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, one after another, CEOs would say to me, keep it. Because if it is not there, we are going to get hit up for bribes and corruption wherever we go in the world. It's going to be a new cost of doing business. And they pointed out that new cost of being business is going to be passed on to the consumers. So not only does this promote corruption around the world, not only is it likely to make doing business more corrupt everywhere, but it's another inflationary pressure, another pressure on prices to go up because this cost will be passed on. It may be appealing to a few of Trump's buddies, but to the business community at large, this is a very unpopular move. I would add, however, that it is part of a pattern of moves within this administration to enable and empower and embrace corruption, getting rid of the office in the Department of Justice that handles this, that handled financial corruption is another example. Getting rid of the chief ethics watchdog in the U.S. government is another example. Getting rid of inspector generals is another example. Pardoning the corrupt mayor of New York is another example. Pardoning the corrupt former governor of Illinois is another example. Totally rejecting the idea that ethics rules apply to anybody in the government, but particularly to people in the Trump family or to Musk, is another example of this. This is a pro-kleptocracy administration like we've never seen before. And this FCPA move is completely consistent with that. And is not going to be in anybody's interest except for perhaps the guy who gets the bribe. What's next?
President Donald Trump, joined by Elon Musk, signed an executive order aimed at drastically reducing the size of the federal government by instructing agencies to cut spending, streamline operations, and reduce the workforce. Musk's initiative...
Did you see this little thing?
I did, yes.
How weird was that?
Super weird.
Why was it weird? Why did you think it was weird?
Well, I just thought it was weird that he was there in the first place, but then also like bringing his kid and wearing the like dark MAGA hat. I don't know. The optics were just strange.
The kid was sitting there. At one point I saw a clip, I don't know whether it was AI enhanced or not, where the kid appeared to be saying to Trump, shush up. And Trump was sort of sitting there, sort of sulking at his desk while Elon was holding court. And Elon was just spewing one idiocy after another. Ed Luce has made some good comments on this. He wrote something good on Musk earlier yesterday. But, Musk was revealing how little he understands how economics works. And when somebody challenged him on his claim that, $50 million in condoms were being sent to Gaza, he said, well, I'll say things that are wrong. Many of the things I say will be wrong. And it was like, holy moly. Literally, I was watching this and I was thinking, this is what happens when you inherit wealth. When you inherit wealth and then, capital does its thing and it, grows, and having the access to capital enables you to make more money. You operate under the assumption that you're a genius because you're rich and that you're competent because you're rich. And these guys both have the illusion that they're geniuses and that they're competent, except they're both idiots and incompetent. And I say that with all respect for the office. Sorry to interrupt.
That is okay. Musk's initiative under his new Department of Government Efficiency pushes for large-scale layoffs, reduced hiring, and the elimination of unnecessary positions, while also implementing stricter hiring standards. The order is part of Trump's broader plan to downsize the federal workforce, which has faced legal challenges from federal employee unions and could lead to further layoffs or furloughs if buyout offers are insufficient.
Several people who commented on this noted, Josh Marshall at TPM, for example, noted that essentially Doge is being set up like a super government within the government. And there'll be Doge people every place. They'll be like commissars in the old days of the Communist Party. And they'll be in every single embassy, in every single department of the government. And they will be able to say, you can hire this person. You can't hire this person. You have to cut these people. You can't spend this money. And that's effectively running the government. And, who are these people? Well, we know they're, 19 and 20-year-old, engineers that used to work with Elon. They are Trump loyalists. They are not people with any experience in any of these departments. They are not people with any interest in serving the American people or meeting the needs of the American people, or even with any understanding of how those needs are met. And yet, by putting somebody from this department in every department, or this ersatz department, pseudo department in every department, you effectively make Musk the prime minister. He is the other person in the government, other than the president, who has authority over everybody else in the executive branch, has the ability to influence them, even though he doesn't actually work in the government. He's got tons of conflicts of interest with the government. He has no idea how government works. He's allied himself historically with America's allies and adversaries around the world. And he has expressed some rather dubious ideas, to frame it in a charitable way, that are fundamentally racist. And I think, I don't know what the last count is, ProPublica and some other places are tracking this, but I think 11 of the people that are areas that he's fired or shut down had investigations into him or his businesses going. So he's also deeply compromised. It's one of the strangest, most chilling developments in U.S. history. Trump's kind of, I don't know, he was a potted plant in this meeting. He was an afterthought. It was the Musk show, and Trump was on the side, and people make jokes about this. But, you wonder, is Trump fading? Was this late in the day? Was he sundowning? Is he not able to keep up with what's going on? Is he just sort of seeding all of this? I had one final thought. It was not a charitable thought, but I thought to myself, Elon Musk is the son Trump never had. And I can only imagine, and by that I mean who's achieved some degree of success. I can only imagine how the Elon empowerment and idolization lands on Don Jr. and Eric, right? I mean, not to mention, Ivanka's the princess, but, she's not in this government. But Elon's Trump's, sort of weird son. I don't know. Some, heir apparent. He did say J.D. Vance is not his heir apparent, so that this will raise even more speculation about the importance of Elon, although Elon can't be president unless the Constitution is changed or we just stop believing in the Constitution altogether, which couldn't possibly happen in America. Could it, Riley?
Never say never.
Never say never. There you go. That's that positive attitude. No, that's not positive. That's negative. All right. What else you got?
U.S. inflation rose to 3% in January, exceeding expectations and reinforcing the Federal Reserve's cautious stance on interest rate cuts. The Consumer Price Index increased from December's 2.9%, with core inflation, which excludes food and energy, remaining elevated at 3.3% year over year. Rising grocery and energy costs contributed to the increase, reflecting persistent price pressures despite inflation cooling from its 2022 peak. President Trump has urged rate cuts to align with his economic policies, including tariffs, but the Fed remains hesitant, emphasizing the need for further inflation control before easing rates.
Not great news, but as we've said, tariff increases will increase inflation. FCPA, corruption will increase inflation. A lot of what they're doing will increase inflation. Prices will go up. The economy will slow down. There will be a Trump slump. He'll try to blame it on somebody else, but he won't be able to. What's our next story?
The Department of Homeland Security announced that personnel involved in combating misinformation, disinformation, and foreign influence operations targeting U.S. elections have been placed on administrative leave. Secretary Christine Noem is reviewing the department's approach to election security, particularly regarding misinformation efforts, amid concerns over its execution. Noem has previously criticized the Biden administration's handling of Homeland Security, including the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, during her confirmation hearing.
Are you listening, folks? Are you hearing what's happening? They're eliminating the agency that identified, along with the intelligence community, Russian interference in our election, other foreign interference in our election, and took steps to ensure that the elections were honest. These agencies were crucial in making sure that the last couple of elections were honest. And removing these people only makes us more vulnerable to this kind of foreign manipulation. But once again, as with eliminating the people who are going after Russian oligarchs, as with eliminating AID programs that were benefiting the Ukrainians, as with attacking our allies, as with putting Tulsi Gabbard in charge of the CIA, or a drunk and an incompetent and head of the Pentagon. Everything we're doing is benefiting Russia, not the United States, Russia. And if you say that, people go, Russia, 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 you're one of these conspiracy theorists, you theorist, you have Trump derangement syndrome. It's not Trump derangement syndrome. If it's true, okay, look at the facts, analyze the pattern, do the math, see what is happening here. The champagne parties or vodka parties are nonstop in the Kremlin right now, as one after another, the objectives that they have set are being achieved to a degree they could never have imagined possible. You could never have done the damage to the United States government in a way that would benefit our foreign adversaries to the degree that it has happened within this administration without an actual war. And even in those cases, it's unlikely you would have achieved a lot of this stuff. It's mind-boggling. If you want to sit there at home, or you want to just write some, angry tweets or skeets about it, fine. I think we're getting to the point where working within the system doesn't seem to be working, that it's, the point where civil disobedience is what's called for. It's the point where we've got to sort of say, well, if they're playing outside the rules, how do we, work in a way that we're comfortable with, that is going to actually put some pressure on them to stop what's going on here. But step one, tell the truth. That's what we're trying to do here. This is the truth. These are the facts. Double check them and draw your own conclusions. We'll be doing it here again tomorrow, just as we're doing it here today. Until then, join us later on the regular DSR podcast with our regulars as we talk about some of these things in greater depth. I'm sure you'll want to hear that. And see you tomorrow. Thanks, Minna. Thanks, Riley. Bye-bye.